Can you all hear me? Okay. Thank you all for coming. This is an incredible turnout. Thank you all for supporting the Intervale. I was raised in Texas in a very small town. In fact, it was so small that the welcome and goodbye signs were on the same post. I had a horse, and my brothers and I had chickens. And that was our outdoor activities until about 20 years later, when my wife and I moved to St. Johnsbury. And I was working for a newspaper across the river in New Hampshire, and we were living in this old rundown farmhouse, and so it was a time when people were doing back to the land things. And so we dipped our toes into a sheep and a large garden and what else? Chickens, bees, and I made a lot of homebrew, not very well. But the two things that stuck, for me anyway, were the beer, which is not tonight's subject, and also the bees. And one of the reasons that I did that was because in St. Johnsbury, or in Lower Waterford, which was the adjoining town, there was a retired geologist, a man named Arnold Waters, who had spent his professional life searching for diamonds all around the world. He worked for De Beers. And he was sort of Bantam Rooster kind of guy. He weighed about 125 pounds, soaking wet, with a brick in each hand. But he was tough as nails. And what's more, he was an excellent beekeeper. And even more than that, he was a great teacher. And he became the Pied Piper of beekeeping in the Northeast Kingdom. And he's the one who introduced me to bees. He showed me what to buy. He comforted me when my bees were destroyed by a bear. I swore at the time that if ever I grew to his age, I would be a teacher as he was. Well, 5 or 6 years later, my wife and I moved to Burlington. And I wanted to take my hives with me. And I searched around, and I had a succession of homes for those bees, first in Williston, and then in Shelburne, and then in South Burlington, and finally, a couple of hives behind my house on South Willard Street, and also up at UVM off of Spear Street. Well, in the 80s, I think it was Penrose Jackson who was the executive director of the foundation. She invited me to go on the board, and I was on the board. Well, I didn't contribute very much, but I do remember a board meeting where we were talking about numbers, and I was sort of daydreaming, and I was looking for another place to put bees. And I thought, well, how about the Intervale? So I asked Penrose, and she said it was okay, and the other board members seemed to be okay. So I brought 3 or 4 hives, and we put them on the berm down there below the settling pond. And that was really nice. And so I had 3 places where I had bees. But at the same time, and this was talking about, I don't know, not free will or fate, the Vermont Beekeepers Association, of which I was the secretary, decided that they wanted to move their, they had a lot, a set of hives down in Addison, and they wanted it closer to the population base of northwestern Vermont. And so I said, well, why don't you bring them up to the Intervale, and or if you don't, we'll use my hives, and we'll use those for our 7 workshops that we spread out through the course of the year. Well, they did that. And so then we had this great set of hives to teach with. And at about the same time, I was teaching history at Seaview High School. They started a program to teach, well, it was called Access, and the motto was teach your passion. And I said, well, I could teach beekeeping. So we started an evening class. First year we had 6 people, and then the next year we had 12, and then the next year we did it twice, and the next year after that we did it 3 times. And so over the last 15 years, we probably taught 800, 900 people beekeeping. So the great thing is this marriage, this linking of the 2 kinds of teaching, where we can do the classroom teaching at CVU, and then people can come and get some hands-on experience at the Intervale. And teaching beekeeping is really great. I mean, it's the first thing I always say in the class is, you know, teaching beekeeping is like dealing legal drugs, because you really get a chance to challenge to turn people on to this incredible hobby that helps to sustain our world. The bees, frankly, are not going to survive without humans now. They're under a lot of stress. The beekeeping is both an art and a science. It's farming for intellectuals, says Sue Hubble, a woman who wrote a great book about bees. And you get a chance to work with nature and it's art and science. So it's really it's been a wonderful experience to both teach in the class and to teach out in the field. And so I've been grateful to the Intervale Foundation or the Intervale for this space. And even now I have 2 partners, Dan Goosen, who's here, and Ron Hernandez. We are BTV Honey, and we sell our honey to Food Hub. So if you're buying stuff from the Food Hub, we hope you're eating our honey. And I am happy to say that I've gotten to that I hope Arnold Waters, at his just reward, approves of my work in his memory. And I like to remember what Kirk Webster, who's a beekeeper in Bridgeport, says, that the bees are the color. Everything else is black and white. Thanks very much.